The transform operators are used to apply the three standard transforms to your particles. Those are position, rotation and scale. The final operator in this set, spin, also applies a rotational value, but in this case it's actually animated. Let's start off by having a look at the position icon operator. When you create any source in particle flow, you always have a source icon, which you can see here in the viewport. And in the previous DVD we covered how you can actually change the source icon to other presets. For instance, you have a rectangle, a box, a circle and a sphere. For each one of those presets there's a value which you can use to change the scale of that particular icon, and you can then use that icon in conjunction with the position icon operator and also with other operators, for instance speed, to determine the behavior of your particles. In this case it determines the position of your particles. So let's have a look at the parameters in the operator and see how they affect the position of our particles. To do this I've actually produced this scene here, and if I scrub through it you can see that our particles are being birthed and then they're given position by this position icon operator. Then to illustrate some of the points, you can see that on frame 35 the icon actually moves. So with that we can actually see some of the parameters in action. The first parameter is lock on emitter, and when this is active your particles are placed on the icon based on the location of the icon, and they are then locked to that location. This means that if you animate the icon in any way, the particles will move with it because they're literally locked to the surface. This option actually overrides the next option, inherit emitter movement, which is actually something we'll come to in a second. So let's have a look at how this works. If I scrub the timeline, you can see the particles are birthed on the icon. They're actually given their position, and then when the icon animates you can see that the particles are left behind. So if I turn on lock and emitter and do this again, you can see that this isn't the case now. The particles actually move with the icon. So this is a good way of actually birthing your particles beforehand and then leaving them attached to the icon for when you want them to be able to move off it later, and this is usually triggered by using an event and passing the particles to a new event where they're not actually locked to the emitter anymore. So if I turn that off, let's have a look at the next parameter, which is inherit emitter movement. Now when inherit emitter movement is enabled, any motion carried out by the source icon is also inherited by the particles that are emitted at that point when the icon is actually moving. So if a particle is emitted when the icon is static, then the icon moves and the particles will actually remain static as well. However, if the particles are emitted during the period of motion, they will inherit that motion and will continue moving in that direction unless they're acted upon by a speed operator or some kind of force. So let's have a look at that in action. I'll turn on inherit emitter movement, go back to the beginning and scrub through, and you can see nothing really is happening, but you can see here that all the particles that were emitted between frame 35 and frame 50, which is the duration for which our icon is actually moving, you can see they actually pick up the speed of the icon at that point, and you can see they're actually cast through the air. This is very useful when you have the icon attached to an animated object and you want that object to impart the motion that it actually has applied to it to the particles as well. So it's a very useful feature. The spinner that you can see below is the actual percentage of the motion that is actually assigned to the particles. So if we actually scrub forward again and move to this point, you can see the particles are moving through the air. And if I change the percentage of motion downwards, the particles will be pulled back to the icon. And obviously at 0% there'll be no effect. They won't inherit any motion at all. So I'll just put it to 0 and do a scrub, and you can see there's no effect. And you can see that if I increase the percentage, the particles start to get affected by the icon's animation. And you can also use negative values, and it's a little bit strange, but it shows there's a lot of flexibility. You can actually use a negative percentage. So as the icon moves off in one direction, it imparts a negative motion to the particles in the opposite direction.